It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? It is the Take Command podcast. That is Logan Paulsen, 10-year NFL vet. I'm Craig Hoffman. You just cover the team on the beat. Now host a daily radio show you can listen to on the Team 980 from 4 to 7. We call it the Hoffman Show, Logan. Very creative name.
Yeah, it's a good name, man. It's very fitting because the host apparently is named Craig Hoffman, so
that's
well.
That's him / that's me. Today on this here Commanders podcast, we are going to give you a 53-man roster projection as we head into the final preseason game. And we'll start, Logan, talking about the quarterback position somewhat through the lens of the 53, as in eventually we'll name 2 or 3 quarterbacks that are going to make it. Right. But before we get into the 53 and the roster of it all, let's get into Jayden Daniels being named QB1. That happened earlier this week. Dan Quinn, kind of a cool way to announce it, comes to the podium. He's like, by the way, sorry, I'm going to change your stories for today. Naming Jayden the starter. Talked about how he did it in terms of walking into the meeting room. And they had, Jayden said, hey, this is kind of what he did last week. We were talking about our routine pregame. I thought that's what he was going to say. And Dan kind of started talking about that, then was like, by the way, you've earned this. Congratulations. Everyone's clearly really excited about it. I thought it was really classy of Quinn and Jayden both to compliment Marcus Mariota and the role that he's played in helping Jayden essentially beat him in this competition. Yeah. But I talked about this some on the radio, obviously, already this week. I can reiterate some of my thoughts here in a moment. But, Logan, you haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. So the news, the way the process went, what to you is important to say at this point as Jayden Daniels is named QB1 for 2024?
Yeah, I think Dan kind of said, this is kind of where we all thought it was going to end up, or hoping it would end up. And I think we all thought the same thing. You dropped a guy at number 2 overall. This is definitely where you want the road to lead. But I do like how they handled it. I think from the jump, they were very kind of conservative with him, in terms of the expectations they set on him. They didn't even they drafted him. They didn't have him go to the draft party, down at wherever it was, the seashore.
Wharf,
yeah, the wharf. Thanks. Yeah.
The seashore.
Whatever. Yeah. Where the water is, where the water and the boats are, where the seashore.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah. And I thought, again, that was probably frustrating for some fans, but it sets an expectation that hey, he's not the savior of the organization just yet. We expect him to come in and be treated like a rookie and kind of earn this opportunity. And it's a credit to him, credit to the staff for doing that, and then I think also credit to the staff for doing it. A lot of people say it, but they don't actually make the athlete do it. And I think at every step of the process, he started working with the 2s, and then he kind of worked his way up, and they started splitting 1 reps, and then eventually it became I'm getting the majority of the reps with the 1s, and Marcus is getting the reps with the 2s, and it wasn't like there's certain times when I was playing where it felt forced. It felt like they were trying to make something happen, and I didn't get that here. I felt like every day you came out to practice, you said, oh, he's improved in this area. He's maturing in this area, and then he's rewarded. And I think that's the right way to do it. And I think, like Dan said, you hope that this is the way it ends. This is the way it goes. But you don't know. And so if you had come out and said he's the starter from day one and he wasn't ready for whatever reason, the offense verbiage, he wasn't ready for the speed, whatever reason, you've kind of pegged yourself in a weird position there, right? Because now he's in a regression. Marcus is the guy all of a sudden, and the fan base is what's happening, and it makes this weird narrative. But this way, if he's not ready, he's not ready. Marcus has got it, and right. I think it's just they handled it so well. They handled it the way professional organizations should handle it, and I really appreciate that. And I think kudos to Jayden as well, because every step of the way, he handled it the right way. The work ethic, the preparation, and the performance on the field, it all kind of coincided. And I'm happy for him, happy for the team. And I just think everyone did the right thing throughout the process.
Right. And that's the thing is don't get it twisted that there wasn't a competition. Jayden was the 2 to open the things because Marcus was an incumbent, as in he had been in the league, and they wanted to make Jayden earn it, and he did. And it feels like it was predetermined because Jayden's significantly better than Marcus as an NFL quarterback right now, but that doesn't mean there wasn't a competition. I've used all kinds of different analogies. The one that probably is the most clear and most ridiculous is if I played LeBron James in one-on-one, very clearly he's going to win. It's going to feel predetermined because he's LeBron James and I am me. but it doesn't mean there wasn't an actual competition. It just wasn't much of one. And it turns out that's how it kind of was for this. I think Jayden was better than we all expected in terms of the speed at which he has achieved the level that he has. I think Marcus also struggled more than we anticipated. Like, we obviously know based off his history, like, Marcus isn't some elite NFL quarterback. That was not expected by any stretch, but he really did struggle with some of the more basic things in terms of just operating from the pocket. It was clunky, and I think that competition between Jayden and Marcus was perhaps wider and more decisive than we thought. But I also really like the way Keim phrased this earlier on in the process, Logan, which is this was also Jayden versus Daniels, if you will. This was a race of Jayden being ready, because it doesn't really matter what Marcus was doing. If Jayden was ready to take on the job, and even if he's not going to be excellent from day one, which he might be, we don't know, but like, you have to be good enough to learn from the experiences. You can't just get your brains beaten in as a rookie. We've seen many a quarterbacks ruined that way. And Jayden got to that point very quickly, and it's very clear that he's passed that test. And I think that's the other part of this is it's not just Jayden versus Marcus who is better. It's Jayden versus the threshold to have the reps be worth it, nevertheless actually be a good quarterback. And Jayden passed that test with flying colors. And that is a testament to all the same people that you just listed as well.
Yeah, and I think like we're kind of saying the same thing just in different ways, because ultimately, like if the expectation is that he's going to be the starter at some point, which it is when you draft a guy that high, like it's him versus himself. And Marcus is there as kind of a safety net and someone to kind of be the agonist to your competition analogy, but it's really like, is he ready or not? And if he's not ready, we've got Marcus. And if he is ready, great. And we all expect him to be ready, but if he wasn't, and I think a great example of that's probably what they're doing in New England with Drake May. Like he's kind of, his developmental process has been a little bit different than Jayden's, but I do think it's important just to kind of see that and say, we're okay. That's why you go sign a veteran. Like, everyone talks about a quarterback evaluation, and I think it's an important piece of the NFL draft. The situation they go to and how they handle it is equally as important. And so this is one of the things you can do to help manage some of this, right? Like, if he's not ready, we have somebody that we feel comfortable with for 8 games, 9 games, 10 games, whatever it is. If we don't have that person and he has to come in and start right away, like, you're getting in this territory where it's like you're asking a big lift of a young player in the NFL. And he's not a young player age-wise, he's got a lot of experience, but a lot of college football, whatever, but it's a new game, it's a different sport, NFL to college, right? It's different. And so you're just kind of you're just creating a nurturing environment for a young talent. And when it's the most important position on the team, like, ultimately that's what you want.
For sure. And I think the other part that you touched on that I just want to highlight again and expand on is they didn't ask him to come in and be the franchise savior or even a leader. Forget franchise savior. They said, dude, just be as good as you can at playing quarterback. And I don't think that was quite as highlighted as it was, like explicitly highlighted as it was until Dan said it. But like, to know that was a specific instruction, I think is great. Like, hey, we've got guys that will be leaders. Don't worry about that. We know that, like, we love your leadership ability. Eventually, we assume that you'll assume that role because you're you. And we've already heard of all these different things around the building where his leadership just kind of naturally happens, that he brings people together and does these things. But it's not like they look to him in any moment to be the guy that everyone's looking at to lead the 53. Do I assume that at some point this year in some big game, like, he will take the step up and be the voice in the huddle? Yeah, probably, because that's who he is personality-wise. But Dan highlighted that even like Mike Sainers still, as a rookie, has taken on perhaps a bigger leadership role, a more vocal role, and something that comes naturally to Mikey than Jayden has. And they've got Bobby Wagner. They've got Zach Ertz. They've got someone like Terry as an incumbent with the team that people already look to and is seen as like the lead commander, if you will. So I think that situation is really, really smart. And to be that, to use one of their favorite words, intentional about it, had a big impact here. And you're seeing that nurturing environment that you just described take hold because they were so detail-oriented in not just how they brought along from like an install standpoint and all the on-the-field stuff, but they created the right environment around him off the field and set of expectations that he can focus on the right things and ultimately, hopefully, thrive once the regular season comes.
Yeah, 100%. And, there's millions of different precedents kind of set by the NFL. I think Trevor Lawrence and his kind of career arc thus far has been really indicative of this, right? He came in, he was going to be the savior. The ecosystem around him wasn't correct, and he struggled. And I just think to be aware of that, to understand what you need to do to make sure the quarterback develops is extremely important. And we've talked about kind of the physical development, but also the social, psychological development that we've seen is also imperative. And you can tell intentional is the best word I can think of too. They were very intentional throughout the process with that.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I'm curious to watch this year, Chicago took a very different path than has been highlighted very well in Hard Knocks. That like Caleb was the guy from day one. He's having like meetings on the regular in Eberflus's office. Like it's very clear he's QB1, and they're taking a huge they're basically like, hey, dude, we drafted you to be the savior, but we're gonna help you be the savior. Right. So it's like not all on you. You don't have to do it on your own, but like that's your ultimate goal. And Caleb is keenly aware of that. There's a press conference clip in Hard Knocks talking about that, where he's like, I know what they drafted me for. Like, I do want to be the best quarterback in Bears history and all those things, which, by the way, not a very high bar. But like, that's kind of the point is like, I want to be something that this franchise hasn't had. And that's why I was drafted 1-1 overall. And I think that can work as long as you incubate the quarterback the right way through that plan. But I think the point would be the full dedication to a plan that's a good plan for the player that you've selected is how you ultimately get them there. There's different ways of going about it, and Washington's executed on a high level on theirs. So that leaves us, Logan, with not as we switch. If you're watching on YouTube, we'll switch to our war room mode, if you will, as we have our 53-player roster projection. Line 1, QB1, Jayden Daniels. Then the question becomes, behind him, Marcus Mariota, Jeff Driscoll. Do we have two there? Do we have, do we just one of those guys go up? Or do we have both of them that ultimately you think make this roster?
I think Marcus Mariota, and I think that's something to keep an eye on. I think you probably feel relatively safe about getting Jeff Driscoll to practice squad and, saving that roster spot. So that's what I would anticipate. Again, I have no inside information on that, but that's just kind of the vibe I would get. And again, you want to keep good quarterbacks around. I think maybe Sam Hartman, depending on the injury history, is also on the practice squad. They've spoken very glowingly of how he's handled himself off the field specifically. So, but I think it's probably two. You keep your kind of reserve on practice squad and let it rip from there. So.
Yeah, I struggle with this because I think Driscoll's really valuable. And frankly, like I know people will say this in the comments, and I'm not going to push this away. If you're going on merit, I'm not sure, like for this camp, I'm not sure Driscoll's shouldn't be QB2. But as we just talked about, there's a lot more to backup quarterback in a quarterback room than just, hey, who's the best player potentially if our guy goes down? And so that's where I think Marcus has the value of being a 9-year vet. Clearly, that's why he was brought here. Like Brian Johnson got to see firsthand what he did for Jalen Hurts last year, how he was in the room as a backup. So Marcus is going to be QB2. But Driscoll has played really well in both camp and the preseason games. He's had some big plays and is in some ways kind of an ideal backup quarterback because of what he can do with his legs. And so I am like having him around, I think is valuable. He's also apparently good in the room as well. Yeah. But I think that ultimately, like if you're going to be worrying about a third quarterback versus a guy that will actually play minutes for you somewhere else on the roster, you probably just default to the two.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like if they went the other way and they said we want to keep three, I wouldn't be surprised. But they do have that rule now about being able to keep your third quarterback on practice squad. So I think he just fits that perfectly. So why not? And again, I think all four of those guys, including Sam Hartman, have done a great job this offseason from all reports. I just think you paid Marcus, $10 million. Like he's gonna be the guy, and he hasn't done anything in practice, I don't think, to allow Jeff to jump him. I know that seems weird to say, but even though he maybe has not been the best version of Marcus Mariota or like, the guy we saw in Tennessee a couple years ago where before he kind of had that meltdown where he looked like the dude, or not even look like the dude, just was like an efficient starting quarterback. Like, I think he's earned this, his experience, the way they've invested in him financially, the way he's handled his relationship with Jayden Daniels. All those things might not show up with him throwing the football, but they're valuable to this team. I think he's done a great job with that stuff.
No, I totally agree. All right, so we'll go with 2, Daniels, Mariota. All right, Logan. So quarterback, we got two. Let's just go down the skill positions here in the order that I have them on our little chart, which means running back is next. And this is really, really interesting with how this has played out so far in camp. Obviously, Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, like they're RB1 and 2, however you want to put it. RB1 and 1 or 1A and 1B. But they've consistently had Jeremy McNichols be the third guy, both in camp and in the preseason games. I think a lot of us came in thinking Chris Rodriguez would be that guy. Obviously, Wiley and Jones have had their moments as well, specifically Wiley. Where are we at on running backs and whether they keep 3 or 4 and who those next 1 or 2 are?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, I did like kind of something getting ready for this, just kind of went through and really high level, just like initial thoughts, watching practice, watching games, where do guys land, where do they fall? And this was a position where I had it like highlighted red, the third running back spot, because I really think it comes down to preference. I don't think anybody's separated themselves. I think Wiley has done a good job in terms of flashing in the preseason game. He showed some blitz pickup ability. He's probably had been the most efficient runner. So if you're going off preseason, you say, okay, I'd probably go Wiley here and upside. But I also think you could get him to practice squad. I really do. I think every team has a good running back. And so I think for the third spot, you want a guy with team's value. You want a guy with some experience. And I do think McNichols is that guy. You know, as much as I love Chris Rodriguez, he's one of my favorite guys on the team. Like, I'm not sure he's done enough to kind of say I deserve the third spot or I deserve even to be on practice squad, which is a really hard thing for me to say. And I understand how difficult this time of year is for guys. But if I'm making the decision, I'd probably go with the experience to start because I feel like I can get any of those other 3 guys to practice squad if I absolutely have to. And to be quite honest, you could probably get McNichols to practice squad at this point.
Yes.
But I think it just comes down to preference, and I would lean McNichols, but this is one where I'd say keep an eye on Wiley to make a push for the roster because he's been an explosive runner and he's done a nice job.
I think that if Wiley can make some big plays this weekend in the game, he can make the team because I think it's that close. But we're entering the final laps here, and McNichols has a slight lead. He's got track position, if you will. Yeah, right. And I think that's based off of his history. Like he's been a pro. He hasn't played in a long time. Like this is not like he was in the NFL producing at any kind of high level with any kind of recency. But he does have the experience. They did bring him in. I always look at that too. I think there'll be a couple other positions where we say, well, Adam Peters brought this veteran in, probably because they had a plan for him. So I think I agree with you. I think Jeremy McNichols is RB3. And I think this is a position that while there are other guys, Chris Rodriguez included, that could be valuable to have, you can probably even get Chris Rodriguez to practice squad 100%, potentially. 100%. It's just there's too many running backs in the league, and so it's a position where you don't think twice about keeping just 3 because if a guy gets hurt, it's pretty easy to call someone up on practice squad, and keep a couple guys around. So I would think that Wiley, I think that Rodriguez, I think that these guys wind up on practice squad. But I agree with you, Robinson, Eckler, McNichols. Okay, tight end. Before we get to the toughest one, probably in receiver, although maybe not at this point. I think we'll find out when we get there. Tight end, obviously Zach Ertz. Yep. He's going to be your starter.
Congratulations to him, new dad.
Yes. Again, so congrats to him and Julie. Ben Sinnott, the draft pick, and then you have John Bates as well. The question becomes then, is there a tight end 4? Has Cole Turner done enough? Has Colson Yankoff done enough? I think Yankoff is a guy we both like, but probably hasn't done enough, but definite practice squad candidate and a guy that could be a future player for this team for sure. Turner's the most interesting guy to talk about. He's played absolutely with his hair on fire all camp. Rough play on Saturday in the game where the ball goes through his hands and gets picked. And then Martavis Bryant, good job out of you forcing a fumble to get the ball back and a chance there. But was that the nail in Cole Turner's roster coffin, or has he done enough to make a play here?
Yeah, I don't know. This is a tough one for me too, much like that third running back spot. I actually think Colson Yankoff, we've kind of slept, or I've slept a little bit on. I don't want to include you in my oversight here, Craig. He's done a good job on teams. Like I went through and kind of watched all these kind of bottom of the roster guys. He plays like an absolute maniac on special teams. And like with the new kickoff rule, with the punt stuff they're going to do, like he's a guy that maybe could make some waves as a pure teams guy and like athletic upside. But I do agree with you. I think you probably get him to practice squad. And the Cole Turner thing is interesting to me, man, because I think you need somebody to be your Zach Ertz backup. And maybe you feel Ben Sinnott's ready for that if Zach does get injured. I don't know if I see that necessarily. But, Ben's let me just say this. He's had a great preseason. He's done everything that's expected of him, but that's a big role. To be like the number 2 receiver in an offense is a big responsibility for any rookie, even if it's a receiver. So that's why I'm saying that. So I don't know if you feel better about Cole in that role. And again, he's done some really good stuff. That Jets preseason game is probably the best I've seen him play in the run game. But I think you need to catch the football. And it's just like he had the drop in the Miami joint practice that led to an interception. Like, there's just been a lack of consistency there. And that's been kind of his thing, is that he's been really sure-handed. He's made tough catches. He's been physical at the catch point. And then that's kind of waned a little bit. So I really don't have a good feel for the direction they want to go here. Right now, these are the 3 that guys are going to make it. I don't know if any of those other 2 guys have justified a roster spot. If anybody, it's probably Cole, but I don't know. Would you keep him over the 6th wide receiver or your return specialist? And my answer is probably not. But again, like, if they kept him, I wouldn't be surprised, because I think you need in this offense with Ben Sinnott playing fullback, also playing some slot receiver, like you need another piece. So I'm going to say yes, they keep Cole, but I'm not very confident in it, if that makes sense.
Oof. I would probably lean. Yeah, I would lean no. But
like if you say like, this is where it's like you say no, and I'm like, yeah, it's like literally like it's more of just what do they want to be offensively is where I come down on. And like, are you going to use more tight ends, like more tight end sets? And we haven't really got a great indication of that yet. So if they said, oh, we cut Cole Turner, obviously I'd be bummed because I like Cole a lot, but I wouldn't be like, I'm not like, oh, that's so surprising. It's like this is like, it's like literally a razor's edge for me with this position, if yes or no. And I understand the justification both ways.
This is a tough one too, because I feel like you could probably get him to practice squad.
I think so too.
And part of that is because he's played better in practice than he has in the games. And so the stuff that's like publicly out there is him having the ball bounce off his hands and get picked off, versus like we see how hard this dude's running in drills and all that kind of stuff. So if there's GMs scouring our podcasts, sorry, Adam Peters, this, your guy's playing with his hair on fire.
But everybody has guys like that. Like I've been listening to.
And that's exactly what I was about to say. Yeah.
Everybody has a guy that is good in the preseason, like that is good in preseason practice, that's going to go to practice squad. And then so everyone talks about, oh, are we worried about losing, in this case, Cole to a different team? There's a tight end on Philadelphia who's in the same exact position. There's a tight end in Dallas. Every team has a guy like this that's a good football player that's going to be on practice squad. So I wouldn't worry about that. Again, he's a former 6th round pick. Like the league kind of views him that way. So I don't think there's this huge kind of urgency to pick him up in a different location. Again, I like Cole. I like what he's done, but it really comes down to philosophy offensively and what you think you get away with in terms of getting him to practice squad.
Totally. And that's my thing, is like, if he's on practice squad and Zach gets hurt, you can just call him up.
Sure.
That's an easy mechanism now with the way the roster rules work. So my question is, do we put him on initially, or do we start a kind of a pile off to the side of these are the 53rd guys, and eventually we will decide between them?
I think you could put him over there. But again, like I honestly, like, this is one of those things where it's just purely stylistically, like what they want to be offensively. And like, what are they going to do with
Let's
the
put
returner?
him on then. Okay. You're Adam Peters. I'm Dan Quinn here, and you're the one who gets to name the 53.
And all right.
So again, Cole Turner.
Feel great about it, but again, like, I just think they want to use multiple tight end sets. You should keep another guy. So
yeah. So ultimately, we need to get Cliff in here to have a conversation. But we can always come back, and if we need a spot, we can say, sorry, Cole, you're getting bumped. Okay, receiver. Speaking of a place we might need a spot. All right, Terry McLaurin. Got it. Check. Everyone else, up for grabs.
I mean, I think Diami's probably Diami.
I was going to say, to be Jahan, clear, these guys are making the roster.
Yes.
Jahan Dotson's making the roster. Alameda Zacchaeus, which I'm hopefully spelling correctly, is making the roster.
Jeez, nice
Diami Brown making the roster. Luke McCaffrey is making the roster. Their usage, all that stuff's up for debate. all that stuff in terms of snaps, in terms of where they line up, in terms of all of that is going to be decided. And frankly, some of it is going to be a week by week thing. I think some weeks they're going to want a power slot and Luke's going to play more. Some weeks they want the quickness and what Jahan offers, he'll play more. Zacchaeus, Brown, all these things, all these guys, they're going to be interchangeable to an extent throughout the season, but they're all making the team. Then there's probably one or two more slots, and that's when things get fun. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
Do we want a wide receiver 6? And if so, who is it?
I mean, this is something that I went back and forth on when I was doing this last night. Like, I like Mitchell Tinsley. I like Bryson Tremaine. I think Rosemary-Jackson's coming on strong here, right? I think Devon Davis has done some good stuff. I think Kazmir Allen's done some good stuff. But I think none of them, to me, and based on the comments you've said about Bryson Tremaine, seemingly deserve this spot. So I would probably go experience here, and I'd probably go Jamison Crowder. And it's the safe pick. I think he's done a good job in camp. I think he's got a good relationship with the quarterback. I think he can return kicks and punts. So that would probably be my guy, unless someone comes out and actually, plays with their hair on fire in that third preseason game.
I think they wanted someone to go beat Jamison Crowder, and nobody did.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is they've given all these other dudes punt return opportunities. They've given all these other guys kick return opportunities. And yet when we're at practice, who's taking the first punt? Jamison. Yeah. And it's still like, they're trying to almost treating him as like a starter that doesn't play in the preseason. And I also think one of the notes that I had from the game the other day that we didn't wind up touching on is I don't think we're seeing anything from these guys on special teams right now in terms of like how they're going to actually attack teams during the season. And some of that's the new rules and being coy about it. And then also, again, like they wanted to give other people opportunities at punt return because they know what Jamison is. And I don't think anybody went and snatched that. And I also think Jamison is almost underrated as a receiver. He just consistently finds ways to get, like he's got that wily veteran know-how. And it's funny because he feels like he's had that since he's a rookie. He just kind of has that understanding of space and all that kind of stuff. He played, quarterback in high school. I'm sure that has something to do with it in terms of the understanding of space and concepts and when he needs to pop open against zones and all this kind of stuff. But I agree with you. I think if there's another guy here, it's Jamison.
And in terms of production and practice, like you'd probably say Bryson Tremaine, I just don't know. I don't think he's done enough. As a special teams guy, he does something different than Jamison. And I think Jamison's value is just a little bit more in that role. So, again, I'm a big Bryson Tremaine guy. I just don't know if the chips are going to fall right for him when it's all said and done.
It certainly seems like they are not as impressed as maybe some of the rest of us. Real quick, because I know people are, yeah. By us, I mean the two hosts of this podcast. Martavis Bryant. What have we seen from him so far, and does he at all factor here?
I mean, I'm sure he factors not in the 53. I don't think he's done enough. I think it's too soon. I think he might be a practice squad candidate. Again, he looks the part. Like watched him out of practice, watched him on the sideline. He's a big athletic guy, but he's not a roster spot guy. I don't think at this point. He's a practice squad guy, and then I think that does affect some of those other names you just mentioned. Because obviously they brought him in, I think, with the intent of potentially keeping a big physical body around the organization, which is not a bad thing. So,
for sure. And it's great. I know people have said this in the comments, and you're correct. Like, if you are going up against A.J. Brown, like having an A.J. Brown adjacent body type to practice against is good for your corners. Like, having that on the practice squad is great. And by the way, if he continues to get better and continues to grow, or grow back into what he once was, and you can always elevate him in the middle of the season. Injuries happen. Like, there will be opportunities. It would not surprise me if Martavis Bryant plays a game for this team this year. I just don't think he'll make the initial 53. Okay, last but not least on the offense, Logan, the offensive line, which I think is pretty fascinating because once you get past like a couple of sure things, I don't know how much is sure at all. So obviously, if we just go across the line, Andrew Wiley, which will certainly make people mad, Sam Cosmi, Tyler Biotish.
Yeah.
Then at left guard, we have Nick Allegretti, noted sports radio fan Nick Allegretti. And then I'm going to put Brandon Coleman down. We know he's making the team. Whether he actually winds up starting at left tackle is probably going to be health adjacent.
Yeah.
Cornelius Lucas clearly is the backup. swing tackle again, or as the primary swing tackle / primary backup tackle. And then I kind of think everything is up for grabs. I know Michael Dieter's probably making it as a veteran that they brought in, but he has not had a great camp. And I think that there's some other guys that have been potentially more impressive.
This is one of those things that's a little frustrating for me, is because like this is an open job, just kind of like that 6 wide receiver spot was open a little bit. You know what I'm saying? They were trying to find someone who could do it, and I feel like nobody really like went and grabbed it. You know what I'm saying? I think a guy that I would probably put in here is Trent Scott again, but I don't.
Let me ask you this: who's played better at tackle, Trent Scott or Chris Paul?
Chris Paul, I think, actually. You know
and
what I mean?
So that I actually think my next name would be Chris Paul.
I am in the same boat as you. I think he's the guy that's of these people we're about to talk about has definitely played the most consistent and played the best. I just get a little worried about like why he's played so much at tackle in the preseason when he's playing predominantly guard in practice, and maybe they feel like he can do both, you know, and that adds value. But I think if there's a guy that I think has through the preseason process, again, I haven't watched any joint practice, but in the games, he's the guy I would put here from just the 2 preseason games. And honestly, playing guard in practice, I think he's done a great job.
Yeah, and so that's kind of my thing is if you can get if you think Chris Paul is a better, you know, 4th tackle than Trent Scott and he can play guard, why would you keep Trent Scott? All due respect to Trent Scott. And so that I tend to think that Chris Paul, that position flex, sorry to trigger everybody with that word, is valuable, and he's the better player at frankly either spot right now. And he's younger. He's a more of a upside play. Like I have no problem putting Chris Paul's name down.
Yeah, and I honestly think Trent Scott's got a good shot. I think there's a reason they're working him out at guard. I think he's got the experience, kind of like Jameson's been way more consistent, but I think he's got kind of that experience factor. Because I look at the rest of these guys, like Ricky Stromberg didn't really, I don't think, solidify anything. Michael Dieter graded really well by PFF, but I thought had a really hard time with power rushes, and the pocket got a little bit muddy when that third group was in there. Julian Good-Jones, same type of thing. I felt like of those guys remaining, like no one was like, I am the dude that you're going to put on the roster. So it comes down to what you've seen in practice and how they are in the meeting room. I honestly believe that. And so I don't know if there's anybody. So I would say Trent Scott's probably making the team. But after that, like it's tight.
I guess Dieter. Probably based off the experience, let me ask you one more name, just because recent draft pick, and he's definitely been better this year than he was last year, although the bar is incredibly low. Anything from Jayden Daniels, or is he done?
I think he's shown some stuff for sure at guard. I think he's pulled well. You see the athleticism. I also think you see some of his like inconsistency. Like when you look at him, he's got 2 really good plays, and then he's got 3 plays that are kind of like meh. And when you look at his college film, like that's kind of how he is as a player. So he, to me, is a very, very good candidate for practice squad. He's big, he's strong. I think he's developing as a guard. Like I would definitely give that a good look. You want someone to be in the swing position who you feel comfortable playing right away. And so I think maybe you lean Dieter because they did bring him in, and nobody else has really grabbed the opportunity. You know what I'm saying? But again, Dieter, to me, I thought he struggled's the wrong word. I thought he was a little bit inconsistent versus the New York Jets, and I thought there was some inconsistency versus the Miami Dolphins. Is he good? Is he a good football player? Yeah, but like the consistency's been up and down in the preseason games.
Sure. So that gives us 9, and that would be 25 on offense.
I think that
sound about right.
I think that sounds about right.
All right. There's your offense, according to, us. Time to name 25 on defense, Logan. Starting with the defensive line, I think we can pretty safely put John Allen. We can put Deron Payne. And then things get, I don't want to say interesting, because obviously there's going to be a bunch of DNs that we know are going to make this team. We can put Dorrance Armstrong down, et cetera. But I also think that the numbers here could be interesting depending on what happens with Johnny Newton and the injury and a couple of other guys that are banged up. So I will say we are recording this. It's 9 a.m. on Wednesday, August 21st. And so if we learn something about one of these injuries in the next whatever hours before you listen to this, whenever, some people listen to this as soon as it comes out Thursday morning. Some will listen perhaps over the weekend, getting ready for the game. There's a chance that whatever we're about to say is dated because of injury, and that could add or subtract along the defensive line. But who else do we want to go ahead and write down here? Obviously, there's some obvious names that we can start talking about, and I can start typing.
I think Cleveland Farrell. I think Dante Fowler. I think both those guys are probably locks on the defensive end position. Yep. Jerzon, I would put him down too because he's a draft pick, second pick, so he's the guy.
Yeah, the only reason that we would hesitate to put him down immediately is does he start the season? Well, I guess he's got to make the way that it works now. Because he was on preseason pup, but then he came off of it. He's gonna have to make the initial 53 and then go on IR anyway. So he's gonna take a spot.
Yeah.
So he will be on the 53. The question is then, do they immediately IR him and then elevate someone else?
Yeah.
So
I think the next guy would be KJ Henry for me. I think he's playing well. I think he's playing consistent. I think he's kind of that perfect rotational backup to both spots. So that's 4 right there. And then it gets interesting. I think because of the Johnny Newton thing, I would probably go. You know who played we didn't talk about him in the last show, but Big Phil absolutely played his face off in the last preseason game, like the best I've seen him play. And I think that might get you in. You know what I mean? In a game like that, looked good, looked like a guy who had some pass rush juice, was running to the football. Yeah, and so I think that might play him in.
I mean, we know he's talented. He was a second-round pick.
Yeah, so that was really impressive to see, actually. And then I'd probably go, depending on what they do with our guy Johnny Newton, I'd probably go Ridgeway also, just as an insurance thing. And again, don't love it, but I think when a guy hasn't practiced for a couple weeks and is coming off of surgery, you got to do something there. And I think the last D-line spot probably goes to Jamin Davis, honestly.
Well, so that was going to be my question is, it feels like there's a final edge spot, because I agree with you that Henry is a step above these other guys that we're about to talk about. But it really, on some ways, comes down to Jamin and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who was a 7th-round pick, meaning that the league passed on him multiple. And he was a late 7th-rounder, if I'm remembering correctly. So I feel like getting him to practice squad, despite the fact that he had a nice preseason game against Miami, is definitely feasible. He's a little bit older player, so it's not like he's a young project type that teams might be like, actually, let's take a flyer on. He's already 23, played like 5 or 6 years of college football, but clearly they liked him enough to draft him. But I think that the investment in terms of what they've done with the project with Jamin Davis, I think Jamin is the guy that's going to get this spot, and it's just a matter of like, okay, so in some ways it's like Ridgeway or like that last tackle spot versus these two guys on the edge.
Yeah.
And I think another complicating factor that I'll just throw out there to throw another wrench in this is you still have F.A. Obata looming. He is on PUP and will certainly start the season there. So eventually, injuries happen, but he's a guy that you have in reserve, which is great, and a guy that can play some 3-tech inside or can bounce outside. But in terms of the initial 53, he's not going to be a factor. I agree with you. I think Jamin Davis, we're officially moving him to D-line, Logan. He's taking a D-line spot.
Yeah, and it's exciting. I think it's they saw something, they've invested in it, they've developed it, and he sees the opportunity with both hands. Because I think initially I was thinking Andre Jones was going to get. This is when training camp started, but I think Jamin's been a little bit more consistent in terms of making plays. So, and we've talked about how with evaluation, making plays is a significant part of it. So for sure.
Yeah. Do you find a way? And that's, Jamin, the athlete, figuring it out, even if the technique is coming along. But the technique is also coming along. Like, he is a couple months into a position change to one of the premier, hardest positions in the sport. And so credit to Jamin. Salute, hat tip. You get a roster spot. All right. Linebacker. There is not a lot of depth at this position, Logan. Like, this is a weird position. And part of it is because they took Jamin out. I think one of the questions we're going to ask here is, like, do we put Dominique Hampton in and list him as a linebacker? But obviously Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, they're the locks here. What else do we feel like we know at linebacker? I think, Walker at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say Walker's the guy that Malik. How do you say his name? Michael?
I think it's just Michael Walker.
Yeah, Michael Walker. It's spelled with a Y though, right? Yeah.
Yes. So we got.
Michael
Number
Walker.
32 for those that are like, who? The guy that's 32 and played a bunch and made some plays.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
And then what do they do with Jordan McGee would be the other question here. Does he take a roster spot? It sounds like the injury's not going to take as long.
Yeah, I also think this is just like we were talking about with Newton, where he's going to have to be on the initial 53. And then the question is, can you sneak someone else to practice, or can you get someone else through waivers initially, IR McGee if he needs that time, and then re-sign said other player or someone from somewhere else? Because that's the other fun thing too, is like we have an initial 53, everyone makes the cuts, and then someone who survives and is the last cut actually gets cut 2 days later, because that's how this works. But we're just trying to guess the initial 53. We're not scouring potential waiver wires here. So I'll put Jordan McGee down. Yes. Long story short.
And then I think Dominique Hampton is the next guy.
Why we like? How does that work in terms of him going full-time linebacker versus still playing some safety? Because he played both in the game. Why are you wanting to put him here? / why do you think they want to put him here?
I think when you look at the safety, it's very dense. You know what I mean? And so this is a way to get a football player you want on the team. And I think he did a good job at linebacker. Like I really did. And I know that's kind of what he's been doing in camp with that dime linebacker role where he's kind of the safety in the box. But I was color me impressed, man. He was pretty physical. He did a great job in coverage, matching concepts. And again, there's some rawness there. I'm not saying he's perfect or fully developed, but I thought he understood space. He understood how to kind of get under stuff, and really did a nice job of running and pursuing to the football and played hard. And I think if I want someone, it's going to be him playing hard, and I want him on the roster. Basically, is what I'm saying. Like as a teams guy, as the fifth linebacker, you can call him a safety, but he's a flex piece. We're going to list him at linebacker.
Okay, works for me. All right, whether we list him as seventh safety or a fifth linebacker doesn't really matter. Corner
is weird. This is a weird one. It's a weird one.
All right, Emmanuel Forbes is making the team.
Yes.
Benjamin St. Juste is making the team.
Mike Sanders still is making the team.
Mike Sanders, I was like, I'm definitely missing one. The question is, am I missing two? Is
Noah
Michael Davis
is making the team.
Okay. Oh God, sorry, Noah. I can say your name now. Spelling it, not so much. But that's okay. We have in a separate tab that the people can't see. We're just going to do a little copy paste action. Bang. Noah, you're on the team. Igbenogany. And then who?
I don't know. I mean,
so do we think Michael Davis is potentially in trouble?
I do kind of. I think like watching him, and again, like I think Michael Davis at points has done some really good stuff. And let's just be clear, like I'm not flippantly talking about a man may or may not having his job. I understand like this is a big deal for him.
Yeah, you understand as well as anyone.
Yeah. But I think Chiganuzium's done a really good job. And I think you want to try to find a way to keep him around. And like when I watch him play, when I watch him in coverage, and again, it's been a little bit limited and it's against the backups. I don't know if he's ready for full-time varsity work yet, but that's the guy that I would kind of say I would prefer him over Michael Davis, but Mike Davis has the experience. And
let me give you one more that's kind of in between then. Younger guy, has some experience, but is a stud on teams, and that's Tariq Castro-Fields.
He's done a good job too. He's done so,
and Dan highlighted him the other day. I had a note in my notes from the Dolphins game, like Castro-Fields had a good night.
Yeah, so I think that's where I'd kind of go. I'd go probably one of those two other guys just from an upside play over Mike Davis. But it's really flip a coin. And like this is where like being in the room and talking to them and understanding their development is going to be so important. And who do we think we can get to practice squad? Honestly, like I think you could probably get Mike Davis to practice squad. Like I really believe that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's at a point now, like based on what he's done on the field, where I think that could happen. So I'll kind of leave it up to you. I'd probably go one of those other two guys at this point, just from a play standpoint. But again, we're just kind of going off what we've been able to observe. So
yeah. Castro-Fields is a guy that's been on practice squad, and Anusium was an undrafted free agent this year. Feels pretty safe on either one. So it really comes down to like, who do you want on your game day roster?
Yeah.
I'd probably lean Castro-Fields in that case because he's got the experience, but like I don't know by much. Maybe because Peters brought Anusium in, and he was the guy that they gave a ton of money to, right?
Yeah, they gave him
I'm thinking of the right guy.
Yeah.
So let's go Anusium.
Yeah. It's a little surprising. And again, like this is one where it's much like the fourth tight end spot or like the sixth wide receiver spot. Actually, I feel better about the sixth wide. This one feels flip a coin. Preference.
Well, and the coin is going to be flipped on the field this weekend.
Yes,
like,
right.
This is a spot that is on the line Sunday night against New England. And both those dudes are going to be out there a ton. You're going to have to watch and see if one of them makes a big play on teams. You're going to watch how they do, obviously at corner. And the other thing too is like, with the position flex inside, outside, can either of these guys play any nickel? Can they play outside?
That's a great point.
We'll see how they test them because I expect them both to play quite a bit on Sunday night. Okay, that leaves safety, which is also
nightmare.
Yeah, because they have too many good players. Okay, we know that Quan Martin is making the team. We know that Jeremy Chin is making the team.
I'd say Percy
I would
Butler.
Say, I feel pretty good about Percy because he's been consistently the third guy. But man, I don't know. Like after those first two, there is not a lot of separation for the next like five guys, and we're talking about
the next
spots.
one for me, for sure, Tyler Owens, for sure.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with that. Where I'm just like, he's played his way definitely onto the team. I don't know who he's kicked off.
Yes,
but I do feel like with what he's done on teams. I mean, he has the touchdown saving tackle on the 59-yard run. Where you see the hustle and the ability to clean something up when a bunch of other guys, made mistakes. Obviously, that's how you get a 59-yard run. Not personal, it's just business. And then I don't know. So we're talking about Derek Forrest, we're talking about Jeremy Reeves, and we're talking about someone else whose name I'm forgetting.
Yeah, let me look.
Although I guess with Hampton going to linebacker, are those the two other guys? And we've actually made all the math work.
It helps you out. And I guess the other thing I'd say is like, do you want to keep an extra corner? Like though I did notice in the preseason game, they kept Noah, they had him play some safety, because I think they really want to keep him on the roster. So it depends on what you want to do here. I think these are the four for sure. I think I went back and watched all of Forrest's plays from the preseason and all of Jeremy's plays from the preseason, and there's been a little inconsistency with them. Jeremy's missed some big tackles. You mentioned the long run, like he misses the tackle. Yep. And that's not an easy play to make by any stretch of the imagination, but when you're the post safety, like it's one that I think Jeremy would tell you and Dan Quinn would tell you, like he's got to make that,
Yes.
And in the Jets game, Percy made both those plays. You know what I'm saying? So that's why Percy's ahead. Forrest is coming off the injury. I think he's playing hard. He just hasn't flashed really in any way in the preseason, so and again, Jeremy's been a little bit quiet. I kind of wonder if the new kickoff rule affects his production in terms of covering kicks. He is the starting PP, which is a pretty good indication you're going to make the roster. Yeah. So it really comes down to whether you want to keep an extra DB, maybe Castro Fields sneaks in.
Do we go back to Castro Fields here?
Yeah. Or you think Forrest is on the roster? Or Derek
Forrest.
And it hurts me because
I feel like Forrest is a better player.
But talk about like tough. This is where it gets tough because I love Jeremy. I love how he plays the game. I love his approach. And same thing with Forrest when he's healthy. But have they done enough with the new staff to be like, we deserve this spot? Or has another guy like Fields impressed them enough? Or do they keep another defensive end? Like it's tough. And so you could put Forrest in here, because we put Hampton with the linebackers, but I think this is a really tenuous spot for whoever this is.
I might lean Castro Fields. I mean, I don't know, man. This is really, really, really tough.
Yeah.
And I think like Reeves, I feel the best about because he was an all-pro 2 years ago on teams. Right. I know he's coming off a major injury, but like he doesn't look like he's coming off an injury. He's flying around. And I think when I think about what Quinn and Peters value, the compete level, the intensity, the
toughness.
Do you play hard? Like, are you a connector in the locker room? Like Jeremy Reeves is the ultimate of everything they look for in it. Like Jeremy Reeves would have a commander tag, if you will, to go back to the draft process. He's got to be better as a tackler, but he's fine on teams, which is where he's going to play most. He's always been, a hit or miss safety. That's who he is. But that's why he's farther down the depth chart at safety. I think you then, in part, maybe you're asking, like, who are we more likely to get to practice squad, Tariq Castro Fields or Derek Forrest? I would think Castro Fields, so maybe we lean Forrest. Yeah. But if you're like, no, we want Castro Fields because he's actually going to play for us on teams right now, and Forrest can too, by the way.
Right.
I could be easily convinced either way here.
Yeah, and I don't have a strong opinion. It really, and Castro Fields has been probably better in the preseason games. And again, it's versus the threes. It's like, there's caveats there, but just in what we've seen and in practice, like Forrest has not shown up definitively. And I know we've seen him play really, really good football, but this is part of the tough thing with a new staff, right? Is like they're not beholden to him in any kind of way. So, it's your call. I don't, this is how tough it would be. It'd be like, this is where I would say, like, how's he in the meeting rooms? How's he been in the locker room? Because there's no like definitive difference, I don't think, at this point.
I'm going to say Forrest. And I'm
Okay.
going to say Forrest because I'm staring at the Jeremy Chin line on this thing right now. And Chin has had some injury issues since his rookie year. And I think of the guys here, the guy that is probably the best backup for Chin is probably Forrest.
Sure.
Now, again, I'm basing that off of his previous production, not necessarily what we've seen in the spring as he's working his way back into shape. And DQ did talk about how, hey, Forrest missed some tackles, but first preseason game, you tend to miss some tackles because you're getting back into it. And this was his first. So this is a spot that is on the line Sunday for sure. But I'm going to go Derek Forrest because I think if Chin were to miss a game, I would like to plug Forrest into a lot of the roles that Chin plays and keep Percy where he is in his Percy Butler role. And I would probably do that certainly over Reeves. And I don't know, Owens is kind of the wild card there. Like, what role is Owens playing? And maybe
he's been an absolute maniac. Like on teams, like if you have time, Craig, go watch the kickoff coverage. Like,
he blasted the blocker into the dude
two times in a row. He did that, and then he had the tackle on as a gunner. Like, dude's making the ball club. Like, he's for sure here. It's just like defensively, what are you doing with him? Because he's just what's so funny when we did our free agent evaluation UDFA, like we were like, he's a freak athlete. Like, does he figure it out? And it just seems like he's full figuring it out now. So
and if you trust him that he's figured it out and he can be your Jeremy Chin backup, then maybe you go the other direction. But I'm going to go Forrest for now. Castro Fields to practice squad, and depending on what happens week in, week out, like that is subject to change. Okay. Last but not least, just to wrap up, punter, Tress Way. Long snapper, Tyler Ott. Kicker, to be named later.
True, though.
It is what it is. I do really appreciate the way that Dan has handled Riley Patterson in terms of the media. And even when he was like, are you guys going to bring in another kicker? That's a question for Adam. I think we all know the answer is yes. But in the meantime, like, Dan's job is to coach the team that is given to him. Currently, Riley Patterson's the kicker. And so he's trying to figure out how to get the best out of Riley Patterson. And even if I think deep down, maybe not even that deep down, we all know that there's probably another kicker that's going to be kicking for the Commanders. The biggest news on teams is apparently Tress Way has decided he is going to wear 10 during the regular season.
That is a big news.
Yeah, that's big. All right, let's just quickly here on the back end as we wrap up. Are there any other names that you're really watching? One that particularly popped to mind, in part because I just said his number is currently 10, is Kaz Allen.
Yeah.
We don't have him anywhere. Is the fumble, was that the thing that maybe crushes him because ball security's been an issue? Like, where would he fit if we're making it? And are there any other names that, as we kind of, talk about this and go through that, whether for positional reasons or whatever else you think are worth mentioning that we didn't?
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. Either he's the fourth running back or maybe he's the sixth receiver. I don't think he's earned that yet. Maybe seventh receiver if you keep 7 as a return specialist. He feels like a guy you could develop on practice squad. Julian Good-Jones, we talked about him briefly. Like, can he make a push here in the last game? Jayden Daniels is another one offensive line-wise. We mentioned the receivers. Andre Jones Jr. is a guy. Benny Potoaye is a guy too, also, that I kind of say, like, can he make a little splash here? But I think we've been very clear about, some of the spots that are in conflict, and those guys would have to do something pretty dramatic. Norrell Pollard is another guy. I think he's done a good job. He's been a good athlete, but not.
Yeah, I wonder if some of the Potoaye, Pollard, could they push that John Ridgeway spot?
Yeah, I think so. Pollard's done a decent job, and he hasn't quite figured it out yet, but he's flashed enough pass rush juice. You want him in the program. It's just, I feel like at this point you can probably get him the practice squad. You know what I'm saying? So like, we'll see what happens. But that's a guy, like if he comes out and has like 4 sacks, like he's making the team, you know, because you don't want to lose him. So, and then you mentioned Jean-Baptiste is another one. Like if he comes out and has it figured out and shows a lot of juice and has a bunch of quick wins, maybe that defensive end, you keep an extra defensive lineman just to make sure he's around. So.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that we kind of see there is, you know, we struggle with the Castro Fields Forrest decision, but that could also be an extra D lineman. It could be an extra O lineman if they want to keep 10. Like there's a lot of, you know, we kept Cole Turner. That's a flex spot, if you will, fourth tight end
100%.
versus a fourth something else, you know, fourth running back if Wiley. So there's a lot of questions to be answered on Sunday. And it's up to Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr. to have those discussions. What do they value as a team? How do they want to build this roster? That's our 53 going into it. Coming up on Monday, we will discuss, obviously, what happened in the game. We will talk about some of these key decisions that they have to make. And then I believe Tuesday is when we find out the 53. We'll react to it later in the week next week. We're almost there, Logan.
Worst day of the year, though, man. I'm not looking forward to that. Yeah,
it is absolutely brutal. I think I've told this story on the pod before. That was my least favorite day to be on the beat because I was responsible for like texting agents and being like, hey, did your guy get cut?
Yeah.
And you're just like, I'm sorry, this is my job. I hate it. And then you'd have to tweet it out. But that's the job. And, you know, reporting on it is certainly far, far better than being the one whose job is on the chopping block.
100%.
So definitely have the perspective there. All right. If you want more from Logan, at Logan_Paulson82 on Instagram, and check him out with everything he's doing for the Commanders on YouTube and their digital channels. Of course, more of me on the radio, 4 to 7 daily. You can watch it on YouTube at the Team 980. Listen on your radio, 980 AM, 1067 HD2 FM, and of course, stream it on the free Odyssey app. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the game this weekend. For Logan, I'm Craig. Thanks for listening and watching Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.